Okay, well, automakers have been a big story here in Detroit at the National Summit, and the bankruptcy reorganization of Chrysler, one of the most controversial in recent years, sparking criticism from some investors and attorneys that Chrysler's quick trip through Chapter 11 has trampled on the rights of creditors, a claim also made by some GM bondholders in its bankruptcy filing. Now, Chrysler Group has just resumed production after a 6-week stay in Chapter 11, and Greg Miles joins us to talk about that with Chrysler's lead bankruptcy attorney. Greg, tell us more.
Hi, Betty. That's right. I'm here with Corinne Ball, partner and co-head of the restructuring and reorganization practice at Jones Day here in New York City. Now, during her 3 decades in the business, Ball has worked on many of the biggest bankruptcies, including Drexel Burnham, LTV Steel, Dana, Olympia, New York, and also now Chrysler. Corinne, welcome.
Good morning, Greg.
Let's talk about this. You know, you just finished creating the new Chrysler last week. Now GM, General Motors, is in the process of creating the new GM. What are your thoughts when you look at the GM bankruptcy? Is it fundamentally different than Chrysler? Is it a cookie cutter or what?
There's some things that are very similar, and there's some things that are pretty different. On the similarities, let's talk about the business, obviously. Understanding what an auto business is, how integral the dealer network is, the supply chain, the erosion of value, and how fragile they are right now. It's very similar. Yeah,
you were worried at all that the politics of congressmen trying to avoid dealer shutdowns, trying to avoid plant shutdowns could actually hold up the GM bankruptcy?
No, actually, I think that GM has a budget and a timeline that should make the whole dealer equation and the dealer rationalization a lot easier. Chrysler had much less money and a much shorter time frame. So I think it was a little bit, we had to hit the ground running a lot harder.
Let's talk about creditors' rights, which has been a big debate on Wall Street, both in the Chrysler bankruptcy and GM. You know, a number of investors and lawyers making the argument that the UAW, an unsecured creditor, got preferential treatment in the Chrysler bankruptcy compared to the senior secured debtors. I know you got your own point of view on that.
Yeah, I do. I think that while typically in the rescue business you worry about denial on the part of a company and understanding business reality, in Chrysler's case, I think the investors needed to cross that river in Egypt. They needed to understand their rights, and they didn't. And they didn't understand their borrower.
Now, how about, you know, the senior secured lenders are going to get about, I think, $2 billion in the bankruptcy reorganization. A lot of people arguing that, or the critics saying that they didn't have the time to find out what the true value was because it was rushed through so fast.
You know, one thing that was crystal clear, and should have been to you, even as a reporter, Chrysler's been for sale for 2 years. It's a process that started in January 2007 with Daimler. It was continued by Cerberus, who, as you know, relied very heavily on Bob Nardelli as an operator to cut costs. And meanwhile, they sent Tom Lasorda around the globe to talk to each and every strategic. We were out there, and I have to think that when the Fiat term sheet was first executed in January, and then again in March, certainly talk about a market check. There was an announcement by probably the most watched American on March 31, and he said very clearly, the government will provide M&A acquisition financing for Fiat or another appropriate partner. I think we were out there for a long time.
Corinne, my colleague Betty Lou would ask, I'd like to ask a question from Detroit.
Sure.
Thanks, Greg. You know, Corinne, we've been talking a lot about automakers here at this national summit, and some are saying that they're seeing a bottom right now in auto sales. But let me ask you, with these bankruptcies of Chrysler and GM, I mean, do they set any precedents for the future for other bankruptcies in other industries, or not at all?
You know, the interesting thing about Chrysler and GM is, although we're addressing very extraordinary times, the tools that we have from the long precedent in bankruptcy, actually, most of which came into being in the 30s with the Chandler Act, we know how to deal with this. The precedent was not new for Chrysler. The legal precedent has existed for some 70 years. And we actually took it right by the book, right down the line, on exactly what one would do to save going concern value.
Corinne, we got to go. Hope we can come back and talk to some more about
Happy
this.
Happy to do that. Okay. Happy to do that.
There you have it, Corinne Ball. Thank you very much of Jones Day. Back to you, Betty.
Okay, Greg. Thanks so much.